bbclearningenglish.com presents Talk About English, a series of radio features that support your English language studies.
In First Sight, Second Thoughts, immigrants from many different cultures and countries have given us an insight into life in Britain, and today we'll hear from everyone who's taken part in the series. They'll share thoughts on whether they'll return to their roots, to live in their motherlands, and if that decision is affected by whether they now think of themselves as British.
Our first speakers today don't think they'll return home to live, although some of them would like to. Renata Thornton arrived in Wales in 1964 to join her husband, although she's no longer married.
This returning to Germany, if financially I would be in the position, I think I would go back, yes. I still have friends and relatives in Munich. That makes an attraction for returning. And yes, well, maybe it has something to do, particularly when you get older, returning to your roots.
Now that she's older, Renata finds the idea of going back to Germany an attractive one, but she doesn't have enough money. Mushtaq Mohammed, a famous cricketer from Pakistan, arrived in Britain in 1958. Unlike Renata, finances aren't a concern for him, and he visits Pakistan quite often. Mushtaq has enjoyed playing cricket for both Pakistan and in England. So does he now think of himself as British?
Oh, very much so. I've been here for 35 years. Tremendous life. I enjoyed meeting people through cricket, of course. I consider myself British. But I'm equally proud of being Pakistani as well, which, of course, my roots are there. And I feel proud that I'm here to represent good things about my country to these English people here, that we do come from a land which has got its own character, has got its own values, and I think some of them appreciate that.
Mushtaq is proud to be a representative of Pakistan in Britain because he believes he's helped people to understand more about the culture, what he calls the character, and values of Pakistan. Andrew Zygmunt came to Britain a long time ago, in 1957. He came as a refugee and doesn't have any plans to return to Hungary. He lives what he calls a dual existence. He now thinks of himself as both Hungarian and British, and believes it's good for his soul. It helps make him a better person.
I knew as soon as I married that I would have an English family, and I was quite happy with that. But again, roots are roots, and they cannot be forgotten. So there is this sort of dual existence of British and a bit Hungarian. I think it's actually good for the soul, you know. It makes you think, and you have to get on with both sides of your existence.
Next, we hear from Eid Ali Ahmed, who now lives in Wales and has never been home since his arrival. The question of Eid Ali returning to Somalia is an emotional one for him, for two main reasons. Firstly, the conflicts in Somalia, and secondly, because living in Wales for so long has changed him. Eid Ali now feels that he's Welsh, British, as well as a Somali, because a new culture, ethos, beliefs, and different ways of seeing things have changed him over the years.
I like to visit and see my country again, but I have to be realistic. I can't just say I'm going back to live there in Somalia permanently. But what I can say is to visit there, see my people, see my roots, and have a link. You know, I'm a Somali at the same time I am, you know, shall I say Welsh, you know, British, both I am, because I'm changed to some extent, you know. I got new cultures, new ethos, new ways of seeing things. Therefore, I can't really say I will go back.
Our next two speakers arrived in London as asylum seekers and are now refugees. They would both like to go home, but sadly don't believe it's possible at the moment. Soon we'll hear from Frank Njikende, who came from Zaire, now known as the People's Democratic Republic of Congo, in 1990. But firstly, Mojtaba Amini, who arrived from Iran in 1998.
These days, I'm thinking to go home, but it's a war in my country now. But in my own knowledge, I don't think that the war can finish today or tomorrow, because it's a long story.
Frank says that, in his opinion, what he calls his own knowledge, the war in his country won't be over for a long time. So he'll have to stay in Britain. And before that, we also heard how Mojtaba misses his family a great deal. Our next two speakers would like to leave Britain, but not for their own countries. Firstly, we'll hear from Dick Gone, who moved to England in 1954 from Northern Ireland, one of the 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom. He'd like to retire to Spain, to live there when he's older, because he likes the Spanish people. He says they're laid back. They're easy to get along with.
I would love to retire to Spain. It's a lovely country for relaxing in, and the people are very laid back. And regarding of Ireland, I like going back there. I got family back there, and I go over to see them once a year, maybe twice. And I get too drunk over there, and I always come back with a sore head. But the people over there are fantastic as well, even with the troubles I got there.
Although there are troubles, serious conflicts in Ireland, Dick enjoys going home to Northern Ireland for visits. However, he always comes back to England with what he calls a sore head, a headache from drinking too much alcohol. So Dick thinks it would be healthier for him to retire to Spain. Like Dick, our next speaker, Rajinder, would like to emigrate with his young family to another country to improve his way of life. He came to live in England in 1977, but says half of his family, meaning lots of them, now live in Canada. So Rajinder and his wife have discussed moving there. When they're older, however, they think they might then retire to India.
We talk about it, that we might retire in India, but who knows, that's a long time in the future, and we might emigrate to somewhere else from here by then. Probably Canada, because half of my family is in Canada now. They emigrated from India to Canada.
Our next speaker, Joao Abreu, has an unusual story. He moved to England in 1970, but recently he and his wife retired to their home in Madeira, Portugal. However, they missed their family, and so now they spend time in both countries.
Since we left London in 1996, we feel a bit lonely because all 3 children are living in London. So, therefore, every year we come for a few months to stay with one of them.
Next, we hear from Yun, who arrived in Britain in 1991 from China. Since she has left, China's changed a lot, and Yun's not sure she'd be able to catch up with those changes, get used to living there again.
To be honest with you, I don't really know whether I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. It depends on the jobs and my personal situation, so I would like to go back, but maybe it would be difficult because I've been here for so long and everything is changing very fast. I don't know whether I can catch up with all this changing.
Finally today, we'll hear from 2 women who would like to go home to share some skills they've learned in Britain. Firstly, Ana Silvia Rodriguez, who arrived in 1979, is studying homeopathy, an increasingly popular alternative to Western medicine. For example, if a certain type of tree makes a patient ill, they might be treated with small amounts of a substance from that tree.
One day, I hope to go back to Mexico and share my knowledge of homeopathy with people. Homeopathy treats patients with remedies that are similar to the symptoms of the patient.
Thanks to all our speakers today and you for listening to First Sight Second Thoughts.
That was Talk About English from bbclearningenglish.com.